Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. After receiving many requests throughout the last year, I finally decided to do a video on the Dyatlov Pass incident. Many of you were curious to know my thoughts on the case, especially pertaining to the Bigfoot or Yeti theory that's tied to it. If this story, which is a true story, didn't have a Bigfoot or Sasquatch element, I probably wouldn't have really bothered. But nevertheless, it's very interesting, and it's probably one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of modern time. So I'd like to first start off by going over the incident itself, for those who are not familiar with it. In short, it's the case of 9 Russian ski tourists who all died in an extremely strange and mysterious manner on a mountainside back in February of 1959. I'd also like to say that this video does contain some unsettling and graphic original photographs, so if you aren't comfortable seeing post-mortem photos, or if there are any young ones around, I'd probably advise against watching any more of this video. You've officially been warned. So saying that, all the photos that you are going to see in this video were processed from the cameras recovered at the scene of the incident in the Dyatlov Pass. So the time is January 23rd, 1959. The location, the North Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. 10 outdoor enthusiasts are about to embark on a difficult alpine ski touring expedition to Mount Otorten. The group is comprised mostly of young university students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsky Oblast. It's their hope to acquire a level 3 or category 3 hiking certificate through the school, which would allow them to teach their adventurous hobby and to guide future trips. One of the expedition members, however, was an older gentleman named Semyon Zolotaryov. He was a 37-year-old World War II veteran, and at the time, he was a skilled mountain guide. That was his profession. Semyon Zolotaryov joined the expedition last minute, which seemed slightly odd to the rest of the team members. However, he was indeed a friend of the expedition's leader, Igor Dyatlov. Igor Dyatlov was a 23-year-old, charismatic, natural-born leader. He was by far the most passionate hiker out of the entire group. But aside from Semyon Zolotaryov, Igor led 9 physically fit individuals who were all in their early to mid-20s. These individuals were Yuri Yudin, Yuri Doroshenko, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Zina Kolmogorova, Yuri Krivonashenko, Rustin Slobodin, and Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. The expedition didn't really get underway until January 29th. There were multiple days spent traveling by train and sled to numerous villages en route to the trailhead. The day before the group embarked on the ski trail, Yuri Yudin was basically forced to quit due to severe health issues regarding his back. He had a long history of health problems before the trip, and at this time the pain he was experiencing was way too intense. He knew he wasn't going to make it all the way, so he decided to leave the expedition and spend time off with his family while the group was out recreating in the backcountry. He was the lucky one, and this left 9 of them to go out onto the mountain. The group's last night in civilization was spent with the local Mansi people. This group of natives had territory all throughout the valley, and although some people say that the group had quarrels with the Mansi people the night before they departed on skis, it's documented in the group's journals that this is not really the case. The Mansi people even left a nice foot trail for the group to follow in the early morning that led them to the trailhead. Looking at the photographs, it can be seen that the group was in no danger at all in the first few days. It appears as though they are having a blast together, everyone's having fun. Along the trail, the group would come to pass multiple markers left on the trees by the Mansi people. These markers consisted of strange-looking symbols carved into the bark that the group couldn't really decipher, though they were most likely just trail markers. You can see here those symbols in the photographs. As far as the journals tell us, these markings did not thwart the group at all or make them uncomfortable in any way. They already knew they were going through sacred Mansi hunting grounds, and things like this were to be expected. So 3 nights are spent by the group in different locations along the trail. The group made use of a relatively large A-frame canvas tent. It was actually 2 tents that was stitched together in kind of a custom fashion to make it longer so they could fit all the people. It included a small wood-burning stove as well. The worst part about the tent was that the door had to be closed by fastening a long series of awkward buttons, which wasn't very convenient, if you needed to exit in the middle of the night to relieve yourself. Each night was uneventful as far as any accounts of high strangeness go, and that's until the night of February 2nd. If we look at the photos here, we can see that the group has journeyed out of the tree line and the weather has taken a turn for the worse. Visibility is extremely poor and the wind extremely unpleasant. During the later daylight hours of February 1st, the group decided to make camp for the night on the exposed Alpine Pass, and this would be the worst decision they would ever make. Sometime in the middle of the night, on the 2nd of February, all 9 expedition members mysteriously died. It wasn't until about 2 weeks later that search parties were sent out to find the group. Back then it was common for groups to return a few days late from expeditions, but it didn't take too long after that for the group's family members, as well as ex-expedition member Yuri Yudin, to really start worrying. Also, before the expedition began, Igor Dyatlov didn't properly fill out the expedition paperwork at the school. He omitted the information about the actual route location, so this would prolong the launch of the search operation. On February 26th, the group's tent was found. This is where everything starts to get strange. The tent was in the same place the group set it up in, and the majority of their belongings were still inside, including food provisions, clothing pieces, hatchets, an ice axe. There were also skis sticking up out of the snow outside as they were left the night they died. The most unsettling thing about the tent is that the side facing the tree line was full of knife cuts and large tears, as if the group had frantically cut through the side of the tent to make a fast escape and retreat down the mountain. It would later be concluded upon closer analysis that the knife cuts were indeed made from inside the tent. Some of these cuts are smaller, horizontal slits just big enough to peer through, and others are large enough to escape out of. It's also important to note that outside of the tent, at least 9 sets of footprints were seen going down the mountain. Oddly, some of these footprints appeared to be completely barefoot, others in just socks. Some of the trackways would diverge from the others and then later join up again. It's also reported that other sets of unidentified footprints were present, though it's possible that they were unknowingly left by rescue members, or they were from someone else or something else. Nobody really knows. The state of the tent scene indicated that something so intense and terrifying happened in the middle of the night that it caused the group to cut through the side of the tent in a panic and flee down the mountain into a completely uninhabited forest in extremely adverse weather without their proper winter clothes on. And remember that the front door to the tent was fastened shut with inconvenient buttons. This would prevent them from making a quick escape, and causing them to resort to cutting through the tent. Between February 27th and March 5th, 5 of the bodies are found. Igor Dyatlov was found on the slope between the tent and the tree line. He was very lightly dressed and wasn't wearing any shoes. Cause of death? Hypothermia. Zina, one of the 2 women on the expedition, was also found between the tent and the tree line, also not wearing any shoes. Cause of death? Hypothermia. Rustin Slobodin was found somewhere between Igor and Zina. He had 1 felt boot on his right foot. He appeared to have perished due to hypothermia as well, but he also had a fractured skull and multiple abrasions on his face and arms. Not too far into the tree line, the rescue team finds the bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko under a large old cedar tree. Doroshenko was in a t-shirt and underwear. He had no shoes, and the cause of death was determined to be hypothermia. Krivonishenko was also dressed in a t-shirt and underwear. The most unsettling thing about the discoveries of Doroshenko and Krivonishenko is that the cedar tree they were under appeared to have been frantically climbed, as there were many broken branches as high up as 5 meters. There were also traces of skin embedded into the tree's bark. This left their hands nothing but masses of pulpy flesh as they snapped off branches trying to get to the top. Were they trying to get away from something, or were they trying to get a visual of the tent area? It was almost 2 months until the remaining 4 expedition members were found. They were located at the bottom of a ravine under 4 meters of snow, about 75 meters further down from the cedar tree. Ludmila Dubinina had suffered major chest fractures. She was also missing her tongue, part of her lips, her eyes, as well as a fragment of skull bone. Semyon Zolotaryev had also suffered major chest fractures. His eyeballs were missing as well. Alexander Kolevatov had suffered from hypothermia as well as having exposed skull bone. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol suffered from major skull damage. The fact that these 4 group members suffered intense physical trauma is very strange, but even stranger, abnormally high traces of radioactive particles were found on the clothes of Ludmila and Alexander, more than twice as high as what is normal. Some people attribute the lack of clothing on the individuals of the group to paradoxical undressing, where individuals suffering from hypothermia will start removing their clothes due to feeling like they're burning when in fact they're freezing. We know, however, that these individuals still had their wits about them and they were trying to stay warm. The 4 people found in the ravine had dug out a snow cave to avoid the elements, and they even laid out spruce boughs on the ground to stay warm and create an insulating layer between them and the ground. These individuals were also likely to be the last to die, as they were wearing items of clothing that had belonged to the other members of the group that were further up the mountain. The physical injuries of these members are odd due to the severity of the internal damage. However, there was an odd lack of external wounds. It's said that the force required to cause that kind of internal damage would be equivalent to that of a car crash. A likely explanation is that as the individuals were fleeing down the mountain in the dark, they stumbled into the ravine and took the 25-foot fall, leaving them severely injured. How do you explain Ludmila's missing tongue and eyes? It's possible that over the course of the 2 months, critters had gotten to the soft tissue parts of the bodies, though many people speculate something more sinister. So the big question is, what caused this group of highly skilled and physically fit beings to suddenly escape the safety of their tent? Before we get into the anticipated Bigfoot or Yeti theory, I would like to go over some of the other ideas. And the number one idea, the first idea that comes to mind is the avalanche. It's actually one of the most easy of all the ideas to dismiss, because the tent area for the most part was intact. There was footprints still present, the tent was blown over by wind and there were like new layers of snow that had settled, but there was no evidence of any avalanche. And the area had never been known as a high-risk avalanche area, and there hadn't been any reported avalanches on the slope in like the last 50 or so years. And when you see the images, you can see how gentle the slope is. It's only about 16 degrees at its steepest, and there's just not enough snow load to cause an avalanche. Another theory is that the Mansi tribe came and killed them for trespassing on their sacred hunting grounds, which doesn't really make a lot of sense since they're the people that kind of sent them on their way and let them pass through that area and had them as guests, the night before hitting the trail. They were to blame for, quite a while after the incident occurred. They did find, a trail that the Mansi people had left not that far away from like the group's camp area, I think like 200 meters or so. But still, it doesn't really appear that anybody came in contact with the tent area. And the wounds that these people suffered don't really add up to, being murdered by people. The trauma to the chest doesn't really seem like, what it would be if somebody was getting murdered. There'd be a lot of external, visible wounds, not a lot of internal wounds. One of the other crazy theories is that a couple of the members of the group were, KGB agents undercover as hikers, and what their mission was to deliver radioactive samples out there to a group of agents in the CIA. That seems pretty far-fetched to me, why they would choose to meet up at that spot. It'd just be easier to do it somewhere like maybe in a city and not on some random slope in the middle of the Ural Mountains. I guess the idea behind that is that, the CIA members would find out that they're KGB and then they end up killing them. If you look here, this photo, this was apparently the last photo taken on one of their cameras. And it looks to be some sort of light taken in the dark. Now, what were they photographing? I have no idea. Could it be something in the sky? Yes. Could it be a UFO? I guess. It's the least likely, explanation. It could be a flare. It could be, this is kind of going into another theory, which is like a missile test or something, of a more military nature. But it could be, some sort of missile in the sky, or aircraft, a military aircraft. It could also be, taken inside the tent. Maybe it's the stove. Maybe they had the stove going. I don't know. It's really hard to tell, but this photo kind of sparked the whole UFO thing. Also, it is known that during the time of this incident, other individuals not too far away in the general area saw strange orange lights in the sky, or orbs as they call them, and also heard a lot of loud noises. So that makes me think not UFO. It kind of makes me think, some sort of military test, missile tests, some explosions. If you dig really deep into the case, you'll actually find out that the idea of these strange lights being seen during the same time that these hikers died is not actually true. If you really dig deep, you'll find out that these lights were seen almost 2 weeks later, which doesn't, mean that they didn't have strange lights going on at the time, or like had weird explosions going on. It's just one of those things that through time, the story kind of gets warped to kind of fit these strange theories that come up. I did read recently that at that time, at that general time, the Russian military was testing these special parachute mines. And basically what they are mines that come from an airplane in the sky, and they explode in the air. So they don't explode when they hit the ground, but they explode in the air. And apparently injuries suffered by these mines would almost match up to what some of these people, have experienced, like the 4 individuals in the ravine, the severe trauma internally, but not really any, external wounds that are caused by like a high pressure. And that could explain the lights in the sky. It could explain the sounds. And to me, it's the most plausible theory. It's what I think happened in this case, is that there were some crazy explosions going on outside of the tent, somewhere on that mountainside. Because to me, like, an explosion is the one thing that is so sudden and extremely terrifying that you can't get away fast enough. That is the one thing that would make me flee the tent in just my underwear. Like, if there was aliens, or if there was a Bigfoot creature or a Yeti, I would take the time probably to slip my boots on, especially if I had like 8 or 9 other people with me. When you have other people with you, you feel a lot stronger, you're more confident. If you're alone, maybe you would take off without your shoes. But having like a group of people, I would feel a lot stronger, as like a group force, that I would be able to put my clothes on, I think, before fleeing the tent. Explosions, though, are just instant, and you would have no time to react to that, really. You just have to go. Drop everything and go. And that's why I think this is the most plausible thing. And these bombs could have been going off all over the place. It would make sense that they run to the trees for cover, instead of being exposed on that mountain slope. To me, that's the most plausible theory. I know you guys want to hear me say, like, oh, it could have been Bigfoot and Yeti, but I honestly think that that's one of the most least likely theories of this incident. There was a documentary that came out a while ago now on Discovery Channel, I think. I'm trying to find the name of it here. It's called Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives, and it's essentially a documentary on the Dyatlov Pass incident, but they're exploring the Yeti theory. This documentary, though, I'm telling you now, you can actually find it on YouTube. The whole thing's on YouTube. This documentary is full of made-up crap, and they're really pushing the Yeti theory, and they do make stuff up that isn't, accurate to the journals and the actual story. They're really pushing for this Yeti theory. And, the Yeti theory was born from this specific photograph here of this, gray-looking being, humanoid, coming out of the trees in this really snowy forest. This was apparently one of the later photos taken before the group disappeared. It looks as if it's probably right before they broke out of the tree line and were in the alpine. But to me, it looks like, a guy wearing a jacket. You can see like a line between the jacket and the pants. And he's probably wearing a hood. To me, it just doesn't fit the proportions of a Bigfoot or a Yeti, but to me, it's a human. Is it one of the group members? Probably. Is it possible it's someone else? Yes, it could be one of the Mansi tribe members, maybe. This Yeti case really exploded when, it came to light that the search and rescue party found this made-up pamphlet in the tent that the group made. It was kind of like a comedy thing. It was like a fake pamphlet, and it was just full of fun things, kind of like a little newspaper. And if you read the whole document, you can see that it's basically a parody. And there's one section in it where they say, "Now we know the snowman exists," or something along those lines, which is just, they're basically talking about themselves. But people really blew that out of proportion, and this documentary especially blew it out of proportion, saying that that line is them stating that now they know the snowman or the Yeti exists because it's been following them. That's what this crap documentary makes it out to be, is that they're being followed by a Yeti, and they try to explain that they cut slits in the tent so they could peer out into the woods to see whatever was following them or watching them. And it's just not the case. They also try and make a claim that some of the footprints found around the tent were extremely large and made by a Yeti. But there's actually no evidence really to prove that. They do interview a couple of guys who are making these claims, who were apparently part of that initial search group, but they can't back it up really. The only people they really interview in this documentary are like Yeti researchers and people who really push that topic. And I'm all for the Bigfoot topic. Like, that's what this channel is about. It's about Bigfoot, it's about Sasquatch, it's about cryptozoology. But you guys have asked me about the Dyatlov Pass incident case, and I don't think it's Yeti. I don't think it's Bigfoot. I don't think it's any kind of cryptid. When you really dig deep into the story and figure out what was in the journals, I mean, they wrote in their journals up until the night that they died. That's how they know they died on February 2nd. Well, I also forgot to mention one of the strange things is that one of the individuals in the ravine, I can't remember who exactly it was one of the men. When they found him dead, he had a notepad in his hand and a pencil in the other hand, and there was nothing written on the notepad, so he died like in the middle of going to write in his journal, basically. Very strange. Like, the radiation thing also kind of matches up with the parachute mine theory or the explosion theory. I do think there was something military going on. And I also heard from multiple sources that the search party found a military-issued gaiter. A gaiter that kind of goes over your boot and the lower part of your leg to keep debris out. Apparently one of those was found. So it kind of appears that maybe at some point someone else came in between, the search party arriving and them dying. You'll also hear stuff about these corpses having like white or gray hair. I can't explain that. That's very weird. I don't know. I don't really know that much about when people die, so I can't explain that. Maybe someone else can. But that's really all I have to tell you about this story. This video's been a long time in the making. Way back in the day when the channel first started, Doug and I, we recorded the first episode of Mountain Beast Mysteries, or what was supposed to be the first episode, and it was the Dyatlov Pass incident. We never ended up posting it because we didn't like it, and it was just a mess. We were like mispronouncing names. We didn't have the whole story together. There's a lot of stuff I missed and a lot of information I haven't gone over. But if you guys really want to get a good look at this case, I have a couple links below. One of them is to dyatlovpass.com. All kinds of information there that's really interesting. Also, I have a link to a recorded audiobook of Dead Mountain, which is, really good. It's over 6 hours long. It tells you a lot of information about the case in a way that's not too far out. It's really down to earth. So I recommend checking that out and putting that on when you go to sleep tonight. It's kind of a creepy thing to fall asleep to. I do get creeped out from this case. My biggest fear is going off into the mountains and having something really bad happen. And I'm usually alone when I go out. This was 9 people. They all died on the same night. Like, that's terrifying. But Anyways, I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Mountain Beast Mysteries. You know, it's pretty lengthy, and I hope I pronounced all the names right. If you guys haven't seen Wildman the Bigfoot Odyssey, check it out at realhouse.org. The link is down below. If you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon page or the Spreadshirt shop. Links are all below in the description. Once again, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.